Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everyone's remaining safe and healthy. I would like to tell you from being from Morrison, you folks up here in Lee have been very fortunate today. The damage just south of you was significantly worse. Storm was significantly worse. I don't know what you got, and I know you had some damage. You were spared a lot of it, so good on you. Tonight begins session number 2 of Alvina Solar LLC's petition for special use. I will note for the record that present this evening of the ZBA are all of its members: Mr. Forster, Mr. Burrow, Mr. Pratt, Mr. Bulkey, Mr. Hughes, and Mr. Meyer. Your fine zoning officer, D. Duffy, is present, as well as your astute state's attorney, Mr. Boonstra. The petitioner, Alvina Solar, appears by its attorney, Courtney Kennedy, and of course, a few of its employees are here as well. Along with the Lee County support staff, I will note that a number of interested parties are present as well. All of the attendees are wearing masks and are social distancing at 6 feet. Wearing masks except when talking, probably, like me. First order of business is when I left off last week, I had decided not to set further dates. However, I think we're in a position to do that. I will note that we are aware of I'm going to call it a letter from an organization known as Citizens for Responsible Solar out of some city in Virginia, addressed to Lee County citizens and the Board of Commissioners. That the substance of the letter appears to request a continuance of 90 days, and that request is obviously addressed to citizens and the Lee County Board of Commissioners. I'm sure the county board, if they think it's appropriate, will take up that request and deal with it. That having been said, I am going to outline future dates. So if you are interested in attending, here we go. All starting at 7 o'clock, and unless notified otherwise, here at the old Lee County Courthouse. Tomorrow night, August 11th. Then Monday, August 17th. Tuesday, August 18th. Wednesday, August 19th. Monday, August 24th. And Wednesday, August 26th. And Monday, August 31st. That takes us through the month of August, and we'll deal with September if we need to, and when the time gets closer. When we left off, Mr. Edmonds was on the witness stand, so if he'll retake the stand, please. What used to be referred to as the Slavin rules, in effect, as if midnight, if the clock strikes midnight, then you're sworn in again. So, Mr. Adams, if you want to raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have a seat, that'd be great. I'm informed that I overlooked, because he was on Zoom, he was over my shoulder, and it's my fault, I apologize. Mr. Meyer, you have one or more questions of this Mr. Edmonds, so if you may ask.
Thank you. What is the largest solar energy project you're on in this county? Neighbor, or 4 megawatts?
The largest one we're currently constructing is a 200 megawatt project, 1,600 acres. The largest ones we currently, they're in operation now, they're recently under construction. It's 2 20 megawatt projects in Michigan. And then we've done multiple portfolios totaling around 100 to 125 megawatts total up in Minnesota.
So the ones that are operational are considerably smaller than this.
Yes, the solar project, yes. We've done numerous wind projects that are larger than this. The project we're proposing in Alpena.
Yeah, as far as the variance goes, you know how wide the corn planter is compared to the 300-foot strip?
I don't know what they're using out in the field today from a width standpoint. Typically, we'll work with farmers if there are areas on the site, such as those 300-foot areas, and tailor basically our fence line to accommodate the width of their planter, you know, whether it's 60 foot or what have you, and we'll try to make our fence line in increments of that, so that it can, you know, facilitate them planting around our solar arrays.
Thank you.
Tell me when you're finished.
I'm finished.
Okay. We'll move to interested parties, and we're pleased to have with us tonight the John Whitcomb, who apparently represents the following interested parties. Adam, and folks, if I mispronounce names, please forgive me. Mr. Whitcomb's handwriting is not as bad as mine, but it approaches it. Adam Luz, Brent Sorrell or Sorella, Lonnie Bright, Dave Gussie, Judy Gussie, Randy Carlson, Terry Carlson. Is that correct, Mr.? If I got the people you represent?
As of now, yes, Chair.
Well, okay. So you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I would ask to continue this matter. Mr. Love appeared at my office at 4 o'clock, and we've been speaking ever since. This is certainly not a matter of a small issue, and I would like to be able to take the appropriate time to review the record. With Mr. Love and the other individuals listed there, I understand it is a bit of an inconvenience for everyone here, but in order to provide an intelligent public comment and input, I do believe that it is necessary to have at least some time for myself and my clients to review the record.
And I appreciate very much your motion. I appreciate the reasons for it. However, notice of this hearing has been given for quite some time. Things have to move along, not only just for this particular petition, but this zoning board has lots of petitions queuing up behind it and has an interest in moving forward. So respectfully, your motion is denied and you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
My name is Ben Adamich.
Ben what?
Adamich, Aeamich.
And I apologize if I asked some things that have already been addressed. As I said, I'm brand new to this. What is your position in Toronto?
I'm a market lead developer.
And what does that entail?
I manage our development portfolio for a number of states, including Illinois.
When you say manage, are you in charge of doing all of the research that is necessary to go into these situations?
I manage a team of people that work on the ground on individual developments, planning and forecasting where we're going to be proposing developments and participating in land use proceedings, anything that pertains to the front end development of renewable energy projects that we develop.
And what is your background?
I started out in this industry.
Do you have any sort of scientific training?
No, I'm not trained in science, no.
Okay, so do you manage a team of scientists?
Yeah, we contract with and we have meteorologists, scientists, engineers on staff at our company. Yep.
So would it be those scientists then that would do all of the research in terms of the effect on the land, whether it be drainage, where foliage, etc.?
Yes.
And you oversee that team?
Not directly, no, not me, but it's within our umbrella of our company, yes.
Is the person that oversees it someone you oversee? Or are you a separate department?
Separate department?
Are you familiar with the drainage issues that can be created by solar panels?
what issues. Not sure that's what you're.
Well, you don't ask him questions, you just answer the questions you don't know.
Okay. No.
Are you familiar with any sort of other issues that might arise for the environment?
I guess you're talking about something that's vague. No, I don't know anything. And if you're referring to something particularly, maybe, but I'm not sure. No.
Were you raising your hand because you couldn't hear? I was trying to find a place to interrupt, but see if this helps.
My apologies. May I move the mask?
Absolutely. I understand that muffled voices are tough. I want everybody to be safe, but I get the other part.
mic close to your mouth. Thank you.
Sir, please don't. Please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So your role is not in reviewing potential negative effects. It is a market review.
Can you repeat that?
Your role at Geronimo is not at reviewing the science itself, but it's presenting the science.
My role is to develop large-scale wind and solar projects across the upper Midwest.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have this time.
Okay, now time for other interested parties not named Adam Lowe's, Brent Sorrell, Lonnie Bright, Dave Gussie, Judy Gussie, Randy Carlson, Terry Carlson. I've been trying to think. I guess I'd rather start with folks present in the room. If you have questions of Mr. Adamich, I would like you to raise your hand. I'm not going to call on any order. I'll do my best to see hands raised. But I emphasize now is the time just for questions. It's not the time to tell them things, not the time to argue with them. And if the question's already been asked, just in the interest of moving along, I appreciate not repeating questions. So that having been said, Mr. Whitcomb, can you keep your voice down just a little bit while I'm explaining this to folks? So that having been said, I invite folks to ask Mr. Adamich questions and raise your hand if you have one or more questions. Yes, sir. This is the tougher part. I know everybody wants to hear you. We're going to make an accommodation for Mr. Whitcomb, which is fine. We have a portable mic coming to you.
My question is, do these solar panels follow the sun or are they in a fixed position?
That's a good question. In our proposed plans, we're laying out the project as a tracker, a single-axis tracker racking system. So those will rotate slowly on one axis and generally be oriented in north to south rows. And then when the sun rises in the east, it'll generally face east, and it'll slowly track the sun throughout the day and face west in the evening. That essentially maximizes the efficiency of the array.
I know last,
Excuse me just a minute. Good question. We're more worried about your microphone. Would you state your name, please?
Nick Popovich,
Would you spell your last name for?
P-O, V is in Victor, I-C-H.
Okay, and I don't like asking people their address. I don't think that's here nowadays. But what if your post office address? What is the town or village of your post office address?
Dixon, Illinois.
Good enough. I'm sorry for interrupting. I should.
I'm
ask
right
that
in
first.
the area that this is.
Okay. Go ahead.
I know last meeting you were asked about noise, and you said that the solar panels don't create any noise. But if you're going to be moving these things, and we're looking at 1,200 acres of these panels moving, is there any noise created from that?
Yeah, if you're right up next to the drivetrain, essentially, or motor, it's a very small motor, because as you can imagine, there's only very, very slight shifts throughout the day. If you're staring at it for 20 minutes, you probably wouldn't even notice it moving. But yeah, if you're right next to it, you probably hear it from the outskirts of the array. You wouldn't hear it. We comply with all pollution control board, noise standards, the property lines and such.
And then I have one more question. If you were denied this variance you're asking for, wouldn't drastically affect the project, would it?
I think it would overall decrease the efficiency of the use of the site overall. With that said, I think if we are seeking a variance from adjoining property owners, and if they were opposed to it, the people whose property we're seeking the variance from, we'd be happy to discuss, waiving it in that circumstance.
How long is your lease going to be for on these properties?
So the lease is a variable term lease, which runs essentially with the solar project with a maximum. So typically the design life we design the facility to is anywhere from 35 to 40 years. So our lease term runs consistent with that design life.
Okay, so if you were given the variance, we would be locked into that variance for 40 years.
That would be the intent, would be to build the site with that variance. Yep, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you asking questions, and they were well done. You get the gold star for the night so far. I see a hand in the back, and there's the gentleman on my left. First few.
Well, I ain't gonna need to. All right, in my glasses here. My name is James R. Richard. I live at 1196 South Eldina Road.
Did you say
my
Richard?
first
Did you say Richards? I just want to make sure.
Richard, R-I-C-H-A-R-D.
Thank you.
Go on. My first question is, why not develop wasteland, which is less than a mile away from your site right now, instead of taking good ag land out of production?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what drives our development and what drives all sorts of power plant or electrical generation facility development is availability of appropriate electrical infrastructure. So essentially we need to be adjacent to or close to transmission lines to satisfy, our ability to get the electricity to market. And so that was behind one of the drivers behind the siting decision for our Eldina solar project. And I would say more generally speaking for most of the solar projects around the state or around the country of the scale that we're looking to propose here.
Okay, another question is, to say there's no noise emitted from these sites or the solar panels, but in question there is noise from the converters.
That's a
That are
statement.
stationed in the field.
Mr. Richards, that's a statement. If you got a question, please ask it. He's the one under oath. You don't get to say what you believe you're not under oath. It's tough. Asking questions is hard.
Judge, he can't hear you.
Okay. Mr. Richards, that was not a question. That was you telling him things. He's under oath, you're not. If you want to testify later, there'll come a time. But now's the time to ask him questions.
Okay, is there any noise? Any form connected with the solar people?
Yeah, I think as you brought up, we have centralized inverters, which convert the electricity from DC to AC. The panels produce DC power. Those have a slight hum because they have a fan in them, which cools them off in the middle of the day. It's indistinguishable from background noise when you're 100 feet away from it. So we comply with the pollution control board standards from the property line with respect to noise. Furthermore, the Lee County ordinance has put in place a setback for the inverters of 200 feet from any residential property. And we meet or significantly exceed that for all the sites.
My final question, is this company a U.S. owned company or is it foreign interest?
So are you talking about, I guess I can't ask you a question. Geronimo Energy owns Eldina Solar. We're the developer of Eldina Solar, which is the project. We're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We were started by a farmer in southwestern Minnesota back in the early 2000s. And so we have been a U.S. Based company. Last year, we were recently actually acquired by National Grid, which is a company based out of the United Kingdom, but under our development arm, we're Geronimo Energy. We're still based out of the U.S. and Minneapolis based. We have 2 offices in Illinois here, the closest being Walnut.
If somebody else can talk.
Okay, any other questions? Right behind Mr. Richard. Would you
Hi,
give
my
us
name-
give us your
Hi, my
name?
name is Brian Fields. I'm from Aldana.
Okay.
I got a couple questions. Have you had any scores on this property that you're going to build on?
Could you repeat that? It cut out. Sorry.
Have you got any Lisa scores on the property that you're going to build on?
Yes, I believe the county performed the Lisa score in accordance with their standard procedures. I don't have a copy of it in front of me.
Okay, could you provide a copy for everybody here? Eventually, I mean, we need paperwork on that. I got another question. Have you contacted South Dixon Township or Nachusa Township Board?
Yes, I believe we have, yep.
Okay. I'm on the board. So we haven't got it, yeah.
Sir, if you want to testify.
Oh, that's fine. I got a couple more questions. You're gonna have a fence around the perimeter of it. What is the setback off the road right away is that fence gonna be?
Yep, so we already have a fence as you stated. It depends on the area of the project. We meet or exceed the structure setback, which is for the edge of the solar panels essentially. The fence will be where we can. We'll put it on the property line. Other than that, we'll be putting it outside of the road right away.
So you're gonna put it directly on the road right away, the fence line?
Typically, yes, unless there's growth plans for the road in which we'll have it set back a bit further.
All right. Have you did a study on the need for electricity in Northern Illinois?
No, we haven't done a study for need for electricity in Northern Illinois.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you. Other raised hands, questions? Yes, ma'am. Front row, pew, blue blouse.
Martha Johansson. And I have.
Martha, what community?
Dixon address,
Thank you.
Red Brick Road. I have read that there are distances of 300 feet, 50 feet, and 15 feet. I don't understand where the 300 feet are in effect, or the 50 feet, or the 15 feet.
The 300-foot setback is applicable to us from any property line of a platted subdivision, and that's in the solar ordinance that we have to comply with, the Lee County Solar Ordinance. Those other numbers you had mentioned are setbacks imposed on us from a structure standpoint, as delineated in the Lee County Ordinance. So 50 feet is our front yard setback. I think we have a couple instances of technically front yards throughout the project area. And then the 15 feet is our side and rear yard setbacks. So if you were building a house or a structure on your property, you'd have similar different setbacks from your front yard property line or the right of way, and you'd have different setbacks from the two edges of your yard, which would be called your side yard. So we have the same differing setbacks depending on the lot property lines. So in most places we're set back at least 50 feet or more from the road with the solar panel.
Where is your front yard and your side and backyards?
Our front yards are, I think, basically every property line we have which abuts public road, if I'm not mistaken. And then our side and rear yards are where our property line adjoins another private property owner's property.
So,
Typically how it works.
so the side yard is a 15-foot setback then?
Yes. Yep.
How many inverters are there per solar panel?
So the inverters we have laid out are called central inverters. So typically these days, I would say they're anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 megawatts in size typically. So there'll be numerous solar panels hooked into each central inverter. So how it generally works is the solar panels are built in rows of racking, and those are all wired together. And then a wire is typically trenched from the rows up to the central inverters for multiple rows of solar panels. And then from the inverter, then wires are trenched from there to the point in which we connect into the existing electrical grid. Is generally how it works for a verbal description.
How high will the fence be that you build around this power plant?
The National Electric Code requires that we have a 6-foot tall fence with 1 foot of barbed wire on top, so 7 feet total.
What is the depreciation of your power plant? Over how many years?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact depreciation from a financial modeling standpoint, but there's different depreciations that we have to take into account, such as, for instance, in our property tax calculations, the state has a standardized mechanism for us to pay property taxes over, and there's a depreciation schedule on that with a 30% floor. There's depreciation, I would say, in the production of the solar modules. On average, the power output from a solar module decreases at about 0.25 to 0.5% per year. So they slowly decrease in efficiency over time. But even after about 25 years, they're still 87.5% efficient. So they last quite a while.
I think that's it then.
Thank you. Other folks present in person, raise your hand, questions. Seeing none, Ms. Duffy, are there any folks in the overflow room?
Mike McBride.
Okay. All right, then I'll turn to Zoom, and this will be a little, Alice, has anybody got their hand raised?
Yeah, I would like to ask one additional question.
Sure.
You brought up the 8-foot fence or 6 to 7 foot fence. Do you monitor those fences with cameras? And if so, which direction are they pointed?
We typically have cameras at the gates and other areas throughout the array, sometimes at the inverters, but they're most effective at the site entrances and at inverters. We don't typically have a camera every X feet along the fence, but we may install them in different places if there's issues that come up.
Okay, now we got another question. Lady behind Mr. Richard. You state your name.
My name is Lisa Hall.
Hall, did you say?
Yeah, Hall.
Community?
I'm sorry?
Community.
I'm from Franklin Grove. These are my parents.
Just
Okay.
good.
I was just wondering, do you have a security monitoring these solar panels 24/7 or?
Yep, it's, the facility's monitored 24/7, either by a on-site staff or a combination of on-site staffing, and remote monitoring systems, which monitor, the entrances, the power output of the facility, the inverters, and everything thereof. Yep.
Any other, Stephanie, I got a lady in the pink in the back to you.
Sue Coors, COERS, I'm Dixon. And was there ever an environmental assessment done?
Yep, we submitted to the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. They do, it's called an EcoCat review on almost any proposed developments. It's the requirement of the ordinance that we submit one. We did do that we did it last year, and then we renewed it in June of this year. The IDNR, the summary of the correspondence with them was that adverse impacts to anything are unlikely, which is pretty standard for.
What about the toxins that will eventually leach into the soil?
I'm not aware of any toxins that will leach into the soil.
I can't, no question. How often do your panels break from high impact winds or tornadoes?
Rarely, if at all.
Okay, other questions? So, you've had your chance, but I want everybody to get used to asking questions. So at this time, this first witness, I'll allow people to ask the second question. So, wait a minute, the mic's coming. See, the court reporter may not be able to hear you either.
Okay. After you develop this property, do you continue to own it or do you sell it?
For the majority of projects we develop, we own and operate them. It's typical for development companies like us to have a develop and flip business model. That's not currently Geronimo Energy's business model. For instance, we've developed and now own and operate the Green River Wind Farm in the southwestern portion of Lee County. That was a project that we developed and now own and operate. So that's the intent with Delphina Solar. We have brick and mortar offices here. We've got numerous staff on the Green River Wind Farm, most of which are from Amboy and nearby to Eldina. And so we'd like to continue our footprint here in Lee County and continue to own and operate the developments that we do here. Thank you.
Somebody else, I saw a hand raised up there against the wall. In the mall, Shropshire.
Hi, I'm Janet Bright, Eldina.
Excuse me, I don't think the court reporter, what's your name?
Janet Bright. Are you aware of a heat island effect?
No.
I don't know can you describe the amount of heating that may be generated from a 1,200 acre plus or minus solar farm?
The panels are dark in nature, and they are built to absorb as much sunlight as possible and convert that to the flow of electrons, or electricity as we call it. Any heat generated from them is a loss of electricity, essentially an inefficiency. And so the panels don't really heat up when they're facing the sun. They convert the majority of that sun energy into electricity, which is their main purpose. So the point of the facility, there are different types of solar technology, which convert sunlight into heat as a product. What we're intending to do is converting that sunlight into electricity, which is slightly different than some of the solar technologies on the market. So we don't typically see any heat increases in the project. That would typically mean there's a problem.
On your other solar projects that you've done in the past, have there been complaints of additional heat, like temperature raising in the areas?
No.
Do you have reports with regard to residential setbacks. Oh yeah, do you have reports to support those residential setbacks as you're installing on those residences?
I'm sorry, your voice dropped and I didn't hear the question. I don't know.
I guess I was looking there. I don't want to because everybody's been talking into this. Thank you, though. Do you have reports that support that in regards to the residential setbacks as you're installing around the residence?
Are you referring, well, I guess I can ask you a question, but if you're referring to property.
Asking her question, we have exchanged with that.
Yep.
If you don't understand the question, you just say, I don't understand. If you understand the question.
The way I understand the question is meant to imply whether there are property value impacts with respect to solar energy development, if I'm understanding you correctly. We've conducted a property value impact analysis study. We did that on our Junction Solar project that we are developing in Lee County and went through the land use permitting hearing process a year ago on. It's a similar study with additional data points around the development, ownership, and operation of ground-mounted solar energy systems, primarily in rural areas. The results of the study around the upper Midwest and ubiquitously around the country have not identified any adverse impacts to property values or any adverse impacts to the developability of properties next to or adjacent to ground-mounted solar energy facilities.
I do have one other question. How much light is on the solar farm field? How much will that impact the night skies that you normally see?
So the solar energy facility doesn't operate at night, so there's little need for light. There will be lights at each inverter. However, those will be switch operated and only used if there's maintenance on them. There'll be down shielded lights at the entrance as well. That'll be both switch and motion sensor operated. So if someone's coming in there at night, that's either supposed to be there or not supposed to be there, those lights should flip on at the entrance, and they'll be downcast as to not shine light on adjacent properties for that very reason. So yeah, we don't operate at night, so there's generally no light on anywhere.
All right, that did bring one more question. At the substation that's going to be built, how much noise is generated there?
I'm not sure specifics on the DBAs, but I've been around a plethora of substations around the whole U.S. I haven't really noticed a lot of noise around them, and they generally are the same. But it will be no more than any other electrical substation that you'd see, around the area.
Okay, other folks in the room. Let's see if there's anybody else. Anybody other? Okay, back to the lady. We're only gonna do this one time, and everybody gets to go around again. But it's only, I want everybody to get used to the rhythm. So either one. Fine.
Will the fence around the property be built on the property line or the fence line?
We try to put the fences on the property lines as much as possible, because then it doesn't create an unusable strip of property in between two pieces of property if the other one has a fence. So we try to put them on the property line where we can. But if there's an existing fence line, typically we'll just kind of match that, because that's been what's been used. Our goal is to not create unusable strips of property anywhere on the site, which would either be farms for row crop ag, or we end up having to plant them with the seed mix and then maintain those areas.
Would the foot of barbed wire be straight up from the fence or bent outwards, slanted out?
Typically, I've seen it slanted outwards.
So that would be over your property line then?
If the fence was built directly on the property line, yes. So in that instance, we would probably need to set it back a couple inches.
Okay.
And the lady in the pink, I think it. And I'm sorry if I don't remember names, but that's beyond me.
But has the local airport ever been contacted to deal with flares off of the solar panel?
No, we ran a FAA tool which analyzes hazards for any structure, including solar, and we got determinations of no hazards. So there's no reason for us to reach out to any local airports.
Other raised hands in the row beside you. Up in the back, gentleman in the corner.
Does your company take subsidies, government subsidies, taxpayer subsidies, for the solar farm?
No, but we do, in light of your question, I think what you're getting at, there is a investment tax credit associated with solar energy development, which is a federal tax credit that we take advantage of. There's similar subsidies for, if you want to call it that, for wind energy development. There's also subsidies for nuclear energy facilities in the state of Illinois. I think they just got $250 or $300 million a year from the state legislature. There's essentially every form of power plant development is, I'll call it subsidized in some way.
So do you get per megawatt? Do you get any subsidies per megawatt that you produce?
No.
Okay, there's a couple gravel roads that are within your project. Are you just going to leave them gravel, or are you going to do something different to them?
If you are referring to the public gravel roads, such as Red Brick Road, Avena Road, and Machuca Road, we'll use existing public road infrastructure. Our deliveries are as such where we have minimal impact to existing gravel roads. But the county does require that we enter into a road use agreement with, for instance, the townships there. And so, we'll be looking at whether there's going to be any impacts. We follow any road postings, timeframes for travel on them, and we don't anticipate really any heavy loads throughout the construction. We actually have some testimony a bit later that will talk a bit more in depth about the construction of the project, but the county ordinance mandates that we work with, in this case, it'll be South Dixon Township and the Township on road use agreements prior to the construction of the project.
How many local contractors, say within Northern Illinois, are you going to hire to do this?
Quite a few. Knowing the area that we're building, we've built renewable energy projects in Lee County. So labor relations and with organized labor is something that we did on that project. So we didn't anticipate quite a few. And as I mentioned, on the operations of our wind farm there in the southwestern portion of the county, the three operators we've got are from Amboy. So we typically look to hire local where we can. It's usually the best labor you get overall.
So you're going to say that majority of your labor companies are going to be in Northern Illinois. They're not going to come from Iowa or Minnesota. It would be Northern Illinois companies.
So the construction process works where we'll hire on an engineering and procurement contractor to build the facility. There's a number of firms around the country that build this scale of projects that we've worked with in the past. They'll typically subcontract out to locals for whether it be the fence installation on the property or any civil work we need to do, anything like that. That's typically bid out locally with local labor in mind, and that's consistent with how our labor strategy was on our wind farm there in the southwestern portion of the county.
Okay. Regarding the LISA score, you guys said you're going to build a substation. What did the LISA score come back on to build a substation in that property?
I'm not sure on that particular property. I don't have the report in front of me.
and lay kind of in front of them in the middle.
I was just wondering what prompted you to decide to build on this acreage?
Can you repeat that first part? I'm sorry.
What prompted you to decide to build on this acreage? Well, I mean, you just,
I'm going to let you ask that question, but I'm remind everybody, please not repeat questions. That question's been asked, but go ahead.
So,
sorry.
yeah, I'll answer your question. So, we look at a number of things when we look at developing, power plants. I mean, generally across the upper Midwest and across the country, we're seeing a lot of older power plants become too economically inefficient to run, and utilities are forced with the decision, whether or not to retrofit them and invest a lot of money to do that to provide their ratepayers with low cost energy, or two, they can retire them and seek out new forms of generation. So we're seeing a lot of that because we're seeing a lot of that second thing because solar, wind, and new natural gas are the cheapest new forms of electrical generation on the market today, and it's beating out a lot of the older plants that need a lot of work to them. And that's why you're seeing, more generally speaking, and you're going to continue to see a large implementation of those three technologies. I'd say across the upper Midwest, in Illinois as well, there's no different. So that's what is prompting us to continue to make investments, in these wind and solar facilities that we're developing and owning and operating. This area in particular, we selected it because of the availability of electrical infrastructure. Nearby, there's those large power lines that run out of that gas plant and run, generally they run east. So we're proposing to hook into those to gain access to the electric market, which we're going to competitively retail and sell electricity on it at a cost competitive basis.
Other hand before Mr. Wood. No. Mr. Whitcomb.
Thank you, Your Honor. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Honor. Hello again, Mr. Admich. Now that I think I understand a bit better what
You're going to have to speak up.
are, I have a couple more questions for you. My apologies. Regarding the lease, is it assignable?
Is our lease assignable?
Yes. Could someone else or another company take it over for you without consent from the source?
No.
So what would it take for another company to come in and take over with?
The wind farm, the solar farm, we see it happen all the time, where, you have a number of, owner operators of these types of facilities. They can sell them. I think there's been numerous wind farms in Lee County that have actually been, had different owners and operators. With respect to commitments made during land use permitting hearings and such, everything runs with the permit that runs with the project. So any commitments we make here today, and as a part of this land use permitting process, that will run with the life of the project.
So earlier, did you commit to continued ownership for the entire lease? I believe we missed that one.
Commit ownership? No, we did not, no.
Okay. But if I remember correctly, you said there was no development with business model, is that right?
Yeah, I don't think the Lee County ordinance, cares who is in front of their body proposing a power plant or anything else requiring a permit. No.
Okay. The batteries that you mentioned earlier.
Mr. Whitcomb, you keep bugging you, but you got it. And I got to remind myself, you got to get up next to the loop.
Certainly, Your Honor. I'll try not to bite it. The batteries that you mentioned earlier, what's in them?
I don't believe I mentioned batteries earlier, but on the project, we are proposing an energy storage facility, which has been commonplace for mostly all new intermittent resources, such as ours. Those typical batteries are made of lithium ion, which is what's in everybody's pocket here today. It's essentially just that scaled up version. And what that does is does a couple of things. One, it can produce power at slightly different times of the day to meet demand, which isn't necessarily representative of the
standard production profile on the solar plant. You know, two, it can take advantage of otherwise lost energy coming out of the facility and store it for use at a different time. And three, it can be used as a grid resource by a utility company to meet the needs of the electrical grid at any given time. It's called ancillary services. There's markets for it. And that's why you're seeing it being proposed on almost all new intermittent resource plants. There are these energy storage facilities. Yep.
With the lithium ion batteries, are there rare earth metals used in those?
I'm not aware of that. No, I don't know what rare earth metals.
Do you know if there's anything in them that, if it were exposed to the surrounding farmland, could damage any of the land?
I'm not aware of any. Again, they're housed in the batteries similar to that's in my cell phone here today. Just like that's put in a protective case. The same would be true for these batteries that we use on our storage facility.
What sort of case is that?
Typically they're in like a standard shipping container, steel, weatherproof.
Have you had any instances in prior solar plants, any sort of leakage from the batteries?
No.
With the solar arrays that are going to be in this land, could you describe them physically?
It'll be solar panels affixed on top of steel racking infrastructure that's affixed on top of steel piles that are in the ground on the farmland.
How large is each panel?
It depends on the wattage of the module, but generally speaking, they're around 2 to 3 feet by 4 to 6 feet, generally speaking.
And what's the distance in between the panels?
Less than an inch.
Is that enough for any light to get down to the ground beneath?
If you're talking about on each row infrastructure, how much space is in between each individual module on each row, typically less than an inch. If you're talking about how much space is in between each row, which there's a difference. On our facility, we're laying it out at about 23-foot row spacing. So we've got a 6-foot module on either side, 23 minus 6, that's 17 feet of space in between, enough to drive full-size pickup pretty easily through.
And with that space in between, is there light that will get under the panels when they're angled?
Yeah, there's about 17 feet of open space between the rows. The majority of the site's open.
You mentioned earlier that there wasn't any heat that's given off of the panels. How about light of neighbors' houses, neighbors' lane cars?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, they're built, the panels are built to absorb as much sunlight. Any reflection thereof is a loss of efficiency. So they're built with anti-reflective coatings and other things where, you have glass covered solar modules. They put coatings on them so they absorb even more of that sunlight and convert it to electricity.
How efficient is that absorption?
Pretty efficient. It depends on the solar module. Typically, from a grid deployed resource, such as a power plant, you'll get something called net capacity factor, which is essentially looks at the production of the facility based upon its nameplate. And so typically solar is anywhere from 22 to 24% of the nameplate capacity. So about 22 to 24% of the of 8,760 hours in the year. It's at its full nameplate capacity, but it's at a time when the grid is at its most stressed point. At a hot summer day between the hours of noon and 7. I mean, that's when we're pumping out the most juice. So it matches, generally speaking, the demand profile of the electricity grid. And so that's why we're able to be so cost competitive.
Maybe to clarify, I meant more of how efficient is the absorption. So if you take a mirror that's 100% reflective or a matte piece that's 0% reflective, where on that scale do these panels fall?
I'm not sure the percentage, but about that of surrounding soil, essentially. When we've looked at those numbers, I mean, I think it's less than 2%. If you're talking 100% reflective surface versus a 0%. And I believe that's actually in our application. I just can't remember the exact number off the top of my head.
So you said closer to soil, not akin to a body of water or anything like that?
I said closer to soil.
And does varying the distance in between the panels affect the reflexivity of the entire farm?
No, I don't see why it would.
Earlier you mentioned you gave something to the IDNR regarding an environmental impact statement. What all did that statement cover?
It's a standard review of the IDNR for state protected natural resources used for most any type of development. So they'll look at what natural and historical preservation sites there are within the vicinity of any proposed development and determine whether or not additional consultation is needed. Essentially, if there's foreseen impacts to that. And so they terminated our consultation in that they did not view this as a impact to natural and historical resources in the area.
Would that include drainage resources?
Typically, no, the IDNR doesn't look at that in their EcoCat review.
Was there anyone that looked at the drainage impacts that this might have on surrounding farms?
Yes.
And what did they find?
We found that drainage would actually be improved by converting partially vegetative covered ground to full annual seed mix covered ground, where we're converting the majority of the waterways in the site from, row crop fields. They're farmed right now. We're going to be planting those with an open area pollinator mix, which should improve drainage. We've conducted a hydrology study and a summary thereof, and it's been certified by civil engineers. It identified no impacts, and in fact, drainage is expected to improve. Drainage and infiltration are expected to improve after our project is built.
How about the water runoff of the panels themselves? Is there any alteration there with it being channeled as it is?
No, we haven't seen that.
Have you had any complaints from surrounding landowners in prior projects about any sort of drainage or light pollution?
No, we haven't had any complaints on our operational projects.
How about the fence that you mentioned earlier? It's going to be located on the property line in certain circumstances?
Yes.
Are there any properties owned and not leased, or owned by someone else and not leased by your company, that will be entirely surrounded by fencing?
Any property? Not that I'm aware of, no.
To your knowledge, what's the greatest extent of fencing that will, in terms of size, that would, what's the greatest the greatest number of sides that one property would have that fencing on?
I'm not sure.
So if there was a square parcel with 4 sides, you don't know how many of those sides would be covered in just, for instance, one of the...
We're adjacent to many parcels. I think on the majority of them, we're adjoining a property line on one property line. In some cases, we're adjoining on multiple property lines. It depends on the parcel.
Are there any with 3 or more property lines?
I think a lot of the parcels have more than 3 or more property lines.
So some of the parcels might have fencing around 3 or more sides of their property.
Some of the adjoining parcels may have fencing on 3 or more sides of the, if I'm understanding your question correctly. I think there may be one parcel not in the project area, but adjacent to, where our fence would be on, I think, 3 sides.
If there are any impacts on the neighbors that do diminish their land value, is there any sort of indemnity fund or buyouts that are offered?
Could you repeat that?
If any neighbor is negatively impacted financially, whether it's decrease in productivity for farmland or decrease in value, is there any sort of indemnity fund?
No, that's not anticipated. There's no negative property value impacts associated with solar.
Have there been any lawsuits against Geronimo or any of its subsidiaries from adjoining landowners?
In general, or, well, I guess I can't ask you a question. Yes.
Relating specifically to drainage or light pollution or the fences being right on the property line?
No.
What are the effects on the soil? You mentioned earlier a little bit about the different vegetation was planted. How does that affect the soil in general?
It doesn't really affect it at all. We're not putting fertilizer on every year. We're also not putting pesticides on every year, like you have with a traditional row crop ag operation. So essentially, we're resting the soil, if you will. We're not harvesting a crop off of it, so we're not depleting it from the nutrients that, farmers would fertilize every year with. So essentially resting it for as long as the facility's there, our seed mix is growing.
At the end of the lease, what is the intention with the panels? Assuming this solar farm was to close down, what would happen to the panels?
We filed a decommissioning plan with as per the ordinance and as per state statute with the AEMA. We would either dispose of them at a dump or recycle them, whatever's available at the time.
Is that the company's responsibility?
Yes. Yep.
The vegetation you mentioned, what kind of vegetation is it?
Throughout the array, we have like an open area, lower growing turf mix. Minimum, let's say, less maintenance required on that underneath the panel, so we don't have to mow it all the time. Around the outskirts of the array and in waterways, we're planting in open area pollinator mix as per our vegetation maintenance plan.
With that vegetation, how much of the dirt is going to be subject to movement?
Minimal, if any.
Will there be any exposed dirt that could be going around or eroded?
Yeah, there could be. During our construction, we might have some civil work or access roads and such. The agricultural impact mitigation we've got assigned for the ordinance mandates that we take any necessary protocols to avoid topsoil erosion, for instance, in instances where it's piled up for civil work. And then furthermore, for our SWIP plan, for our stormwater permit, they have strict requirements with respect to sediment and erosion controls to prevent that kind of thing.
And then one final question. Without the tax incentives or other governmental incentives, would this be a profitable project?
If you took away the incentives for every power plant, I don't know. I mean, it would surely shake up the market. The nukes weren't subsidized, if the coal facilities weren't subsidized, if wind and solar weren't, so I don't know.
And was that for all energy subsidies or solar specific?
All subsidies.
How about for solar specific?
Yes, if we could sell the electricity at a market rate, sure, it'd be profitable, yes.
Thank you. Zoom, all right. Alex, can you help me out? My name and Mr. Sheeline, I'm told you have your hand up. Would you please state your name, spell it for my, this is a little awkward for us. You're over our back shoulders, so bear with us. Would you state your name, spell it, and what community you live in?
No problem, Your Honor. My name is Jim Sheeline, Schielein. Community is Dixon, Illinois, and I am a county board member. Two questions, and I kind of follow up to Tom's question in regards to vegetation. What mitigation, water mitigation rule does this project or any solar project operate in? Is it agriculture or is it considered industrial?
You kind of faded out the last two words, or
I'm
the,
sorry. Let me get closer to my laptop. What water mitigation rule will this project or any solar project operate by? Is it considered agriculture or industrial?
I guess I don't get the reference to a water mitigation rule. Typically with stormwater, runoff, it's viewed like any other structure when it comes to stormwater permitting. If that answers your question.
okay, folks, you don't speak for the questioner, okay, please.
On the, I guess the basis of the question is in agriculture, when the higher person, when it rains, when the water runs off, the person lower down the line has to take the water. So that's the way agriculture operates. And industrial, other forms of development have different rules. I guess then the second question is that you mentioned the hydrological study. Have you completed a water mitigation retention plan for the protection of downstream neighbors?
No, we haven't. We haven't completed a water mitigation plan. Our hydrology study that we have conducted indicates that drainage on the site will generally be improved. I would mention that we have very strict, from a subsurface drainage standpoint, which is different than surface, I understand. From a subsurface drainage standpoint, the extent there's any tiles within the facility, we're obligated per statute to sign agricultural impact mitigation agreement. And a large portion of that agreement governs, our obligation to maintain the tiles on within the facility for the purposes of maintaining that subsurface drainage continuation if there are adjoining properties that hook into the tile system, for instance. In terms of surface drainage, which is a different, arguably a different subject, trying to hit on both. Pretty sure the question was maybe on both. We anticipate it to improve mainly because of the fact that there are a number of farmed waterways throughout the site, and we're essentially turning those to pasture land by about 239 acres worth within the fenced area that we're turning from existing row crop ag. They're farming in a lot of those waterways, and we're going to be planting a seed mix over them. So overall, we're not going to inhibit drainage from adjoining properties coming through. And actually, we expect there to be an increase in infiltration into the soil. So we actually expect a decrease in runoff from the site to adjoining properties.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had, Your Honor.
Thank you. Alice, do you see any other Zoom hands? I don't want to restrict it strictly to hands. Folks on Zoom, if you have a question, please turn on make sure your audio's on. And I think what will happen is we will see a yellow square around you on the board. Okay, Alice just unmuted you all. And I don't know how to do this other than first come, first serve. If you have a question, say, question. I think, anybody say something so I know you have a question. Say, hey Judge, hey Tim, hey, I got a question. My turn. Something. All right. Oh, sorry. All right. We're still waiting to unmute you all. Technical problem. All right. Folks on Zoom, I wanted to take a break anyway. So we're going to take a break while our IT staff solves maybe a muting problem here. Folks, if you want to stretch your legs, that's great. And this isn't jail, and I'm not going to tell you what you want to do, but I encourage you all to social distance. If you go out and stretch your legs and wander the hall, please, and keep your mask on. You don't want to start happening here what's happening in Carroll County now. Okay, we'll take till 20 after. By that clock, wait a minute. Yeah, 20 after.
As I'm unmuting, they're like remuting themselves, so I'm not sure.
What's happening?
I'm unmuting them, but then they mute themselves again.
Oh.
So I can't tell who's.
Huh.
Jenny texted me and she said she unmuted us. She said, they told us we were released and how to unmute ourselves. So it says the host is like to mute your microphone.
Well, I mean,
Star 6 to unmute.
I just want to make sure we give a chance to answer
So you
questions.
did great.
No. No.
No redirect?
No regrets.
Yeah, you did right. She's like, tell her to unmute. You're welcome. Okay, so they get a notification when they're being unmuted, so then they have the option to unmute themselves.
Okay. I just want to make sure there wasn't
Right, I know. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm involved. Someone
I mean, there's really nothing you can do on their end because they have.
They got control of their view.
Yeah.
Mike, I was trying to make sure that there wasn't, the last thing I want is somebody.
Yeah, no.
Other than raising their hand, is there another way for them to indicate somehow that they have a question?
There's a chat.
That's right. That's down at the bottom of their screen too, right? All right, I'm gonna tell that then. We haven't got it.
Okay, you're welcome.
Glenn. I'm wondering.
So far, so good.
These people are asking.
Yeah, yep. I was a little surprised.
Hardly anybody launched into telling them.
So, yeah, yep.
Usually that education takes a whole night.
Started off well with one gentleman there.
It was concise.
This is the question.
Much.
Otherwise, it's like. Otherwise, who's there? Not now. Well, I better. Whenever you wear that, Glenn, it looks like a Western movie. My sister may be from there. She may be a Western college from there. Sounds to me. Usually trouble where my ears stick out and I can't see this. But I'm not gonna tell her that. Yeah. Just save yourself that hassle. Okay. was standing right next to that. Oh my God. We got smoked. Yeah.
Yeah, when I went to the courthouse, it was like, trees everywhere on the ground, and like, oh.
We went through 9 miles. 91. I've never seen.
I was like,
There were. Next door neighbors still.
yeah, I didn't see the
When it was finally over, we got power out. And I went and looked at my, I was doing meetings. When I lost the Zoom meetings, I'm not looking
I never saw, I was on the field, watching corn grow, I never saw it. How it is very
Is it still?
No, it's not called, it's like a year.
Right.
No,
So there's still water in the straw.
Oh, it's a lot of like, it's got
It's got more stout. I'm surprised. When we guys saw the more stuff. My wife's got. None of the big. I don't remember first.
I was going back in 09 and come across Iowa the same way. And it got here, we were in Seaport. We were in California. We had huge trees. We didn't have that.
Okay. Let's go.
All righty. Make an effort for everybody to get back in place. And thank you. All right, we're going to try one more time for the Zoom folks. We're told that Ms. Hinkle unmuted folks, and then folks turned around and muted themselves right back because for whatever reason they didn't want folks to hear what's going on in the background of their, wherever their computer was. So if any folks on Zoom have a question, you can do one or two things. Unmute yourself. One of three things. Down at the bottom of your screen, if you move your cursor over it, you will find an icon for raise hand. If you hit that icon, we will see a hand raised on the screen here and know that you have a question. Or the third alternative is down at the bottom of the screen, you will see an icon. I think it's got a little bubble on it that says chat. If you press chat, you can type in a message and just make the message, I have a question. I'll wait about 30 seconds here to see if anybody does have a question. The reason I'm looking for is I can see over Alice's shoulder and I can see that to make out what's happening with the folks on Zoom. Yeah. Give a few more seconds here. All right, I don't see any questions being viewed. Alice, I don't see any indication. Okay. Thank you. That concludes cross-examination of Mr. Adamich. You may step down. Thank you. And Ms. Kennedy, you may continue.
Thank you, Judge. I'd like to call Brett Schneider to the stand.
You're looking up there as if he's going to peer up there.
Yeah. Are you muted now?
You're unmuted. We can hear you. You want to raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I didn't hear you, sir. You're going to have to speak up.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay. Let me take care of a couple housekeeping things first. Callie, can you hear him okay so far? You're going to have to speak very clearly into whatever audio device you have. It's easy to start backing away from it, I understand, but try and keep your mouth right next to it so we can hear you. And of course, digitally, your voice can get a little more slurred. So if you'll make an effort to talk as slowly as you can, that would be appreciated as well. Okay. Ms. Kennedy, you may inquire.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Could you please spell your name for the record?
Brett, E-R-E-T-T, Schneider, S-C-H-N-E-I-D-E-R.
And how are you employed?
I'm a construction manager, full-time employed at Toronto Energy.
And how long have you been with Geronimo?
I've been with Toronto just under 3 years now.
Could you provide me with a brief summary of your educational background?
Yes, I attended North Dakota State University. I've got a bachelor's degree in construction management, and I also have a master's in business from the University of Mary, North Dakota.
And what is your work experience?
I started out of college building wind farms with a company out of Fargo called Lonza Construction. Traveled for a little under 4 years building wind farms. Then decided to get off the road and work for the local utility called XL Energy in Minneapolis. And then worked there for roughly 4 years and decided to want to get back into renewable energy. So went back, started working with Geronimo about, like I said, 3 years ago. So.
Aside from your bachelor's and your master's, are there any other licenses or certifications that you've obtained?
I have a certificate of project management professional from the project management is accredited the license that fairly common within the construction and project management industry. So that's one, and also I have I let it expire a stormwater installer and certificate from the University of Minnesota.
And you're here on behalf of Aldina Solar LLC, is that correct?
That's correct.
Have you reviewed the petition and application submitted by Alvina Solar?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with the project area?
Yes, I am.
Are you here to testify regarding the construction aspect of the project?
Yes,
To the best of your knowledge, is the petitioner committed to using local union for the construction of the project?
yes.
Can you give me an idea of what a typical construction day looks like for this project?
A typical day would include the craft individuals showing up to the site. They would go through a safety briefing and probably do some stretching and get focused for the day. Then they would, talk about they break out in their respective groups and disciplines and come up with a plan for the day. They would go out and depending on the phase of the project, either working on roads or installing tiles or racking or whatnot, they would kind of just disperse from there and work on their typical or their particular craft. So,
Will there be the construction of any new roads for this project?
there will be internal roads throughout the site. So there'll be some grading activity and hauling gravel in to build the roads to access inverters and critical infrastructure within the project that would need maintenance and also access to the substation internally.
And how many trucks can we expect to see per day?
I would expect on a given day, delivery-wise, coming from outside of the project footprint, maybe 10 to 20 roughly trucks a day.
And is this only during the construction phase?
Yeah, that would be the height of the volume of traffic during construction.
And would these be normal trucks, semis?
They will be legal loads, so they do under 80,000 pounds. Typical load of, say, solar modules would be right around 42,000 pounds. So lower than the permitted limit of load.
And are you familiar with Lee County?
I am familiar with Lee County. I worked on the Green River Wind project. I was on that for roughly a year and a half, down there quite a bit. So quite familiar with the area.
And it's my understanding that you have a presentation that you'd like to give tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Please proceed.
See if I can share my screen. Can you guys see my screen now?
I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so typical start of construction, prior to breaking ground, we will work with the landlord to obtain their tile information. So we would try to get any maps or any known location of tiles, and we would then aggregate that all into a map from a third-party engineer who would overlay it onto our facilities map and just see if there's any obstructions and if there's any way we could value engineer some of those obstructions, some of those drain tiles straight out. Then we go from there and we have some drone technology that we can fly the site and get thermal imagery during some high flow areas, just to see if there's any drain tiles or any fluids that we might miss. It does occur at times that farmers don't know exactly where all the tiles on their lands are. So we do best to locate all that so we can avoid strikes, but we know it doesn't inevitably happen. So we obviously do our best under the EMA. We're required to address it within a certain amount of time, so as quickly as possible. I believe it's 48 hours. So we we do address any strikes, fix them as quickly as possible. If it's not feasible within 48 hours, we'll, we block it off and fence it out so there's no obstructions or dirt or animals or anything getting into that tile. So it would create, more of a hazard and make it more difficult to fix the strike. So after that, we fix it, we GPS it, we document any strikes, put it back into as better condition as it was before. And at the end of the project, we come up with an as-built document, which is showing where all the tile strikes were, where we know tiles are, if they didn't have it documented before, and we'll give it to the landowners for their records. So that's pretty much it under AMA. We also, when we're building roads, we'll strip the topsoil off and build with, typically like this stuff, the natural native soils, and then kind of disperse the topsoil throughout the rest of the project footprint. Going to the next slide here. Mr. Adams also mentioned road use agreements with the county and township. These are a couple of potential routes that we would take, just depending on where the materials are coming from. So prior to the execution of the road use agreement, we'll have typically a third-party engineer come out, assess the roads, any structures, any bridges, culverts, etc. Just to see what the current condition is. So you can see kind of a before and after picture on what the conditions of the roads are, and then any fixes that we may need to cover. But like I said, we are committed to coming into agreements with the counties and townships in that regard. Talked a little bit about the EMA already. We do commit and anticipate to be in full compliance with the AMA. Our Green River project, we were the first ones, I believe, in the state to be under this agreement. So we have experience with it already, and we know what it takes to be in full compliance. We also, at the beginning of projects, we talked to, or we engage in third-party engineer to come up with a SWIP plan, so a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and that is in there to basically prevent and protect the neighboring water bodies and neighbors in general from sediment, erosion, any runoff or any dust leaving the site. So the engineer will come up with best management practices on how to control that based on hydrology of the site. Like Ben mentioned, we do have a hydrology report already in place. We'll also use local topography to kind of calculate what types of best management practices will be most suitable for that certain area, just to prevent any erosion from leaving the site, like I said. And another thing that we like to stress is dust control. So the SWIP plan will also typically cover means and methods on how to suppress dust from leaving the site. And usually it's like a water truck and having a couple, like one or two water trucks on site. Maybe a sweeper in a lay-on yard to kind of clean up the roads. If they're high volume of traffic, take mud in certain areas, so sweep up the roads every day after the end of the shift. So, and that's kind of it for me as far as that presentation goes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
I have a quick question before the folks start, and I may have missed it, Mr. Schneider. What position do you hold with Aldina Solar LLC or Geronimo?
So I'm a construction manager, mainly based out of the Minneapolis office, and I manage the project and a spec team of usually 3 or 4 individuals.
So you're the construction manager for the Alvena Solar Project? Okay, thanks. All right, turning to the ZBA. Questions, Mr. Forster?
None at this time.
Mr. Burrow?
None.
Mr. Pratt?
No.
Mr. Bolte?
No.
Mr. Hughes?
No.
Mr. Meyer?
No.
Ms. Duffy, question?
No.
Mr. Boomstra?
No, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Whitcomb?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. If I could
Sure.
get my mask off and my glasses. Good evening, Mr. Schneider.
Meaning,
In your time with Geronimo or other similar companies, actually, first, can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
All right. In your time with Geronimo or other similar companies, have you worked on any projects of this size?
Now you've got to lean over and, I know.
Apologies.
You don't have to keep out, it's easy to do.
Would you like me to repeat that, Mr. Snyder, or did you hear it okay?
I think I heard you, yeah. I worked on projects this size and larger, in the 200 megawatt range is one of the larger wind farms I've done. So yes, I have done this project.
How about for solar?
Yeah, right now I'm managing roughly 40 megawatts in Michigan, and we just kicked off another 200 megawatt project. So yeah.
During the construction, where is the material going to be stored?
So it's stored on site as we get delivered. It's, procured and manufactured throughout the U.S. and the world in some cases, but it's stored on site as we build.
Are there particular areas on the site where material is stored, or is it just wherever it's needed?
A lot of times we'll have a laydown unit constructed, so it'll be office trailers, parking, wire and cable storage. We also, as modules come in, kind of stage them throughout the site, so it's closer to the install crew, so it's a little more efficient that way.
And will that area have any effect on the drainage?
We don't anticipate it. No.
Has it ever in previous projects you've worked on?
Has it ever what?
Has it ever affected drainage in previous projects you've worked on?
No, not materially.
What do you mean by not materially?
I've seen runoff of the gravel a little bit, but the silt fence is included in the plan, so it catches the gravel, so it doesn't need the site.
And is that storage generally done anywhere near a waterway?
Storage of what material?
Material or anything else that you mentioned earlier.
You keep the material out of waterways. Keep it on dry ground as much as possible.
How long is the construction phase?
Our project this size would be roughly 12 to 15 months.
And would that number of trucks you mentioned earlier be continual throughout that, or would it vary?
It could vary, but we try to work throughout the winter if possible.
And what sort of variance is expected in terms of high or low trucks per day?
We would be roughly 10 to 20 trucks per day in the state area.
So 10 is the low end and 20 is the high end for any given day?
Yeah, roughly.
You mentioned earlier that if a tile is stricken, that you'll repair it. If there's other damage to tiles that you find, do you repair those too?
Yes, that's in the general best interest of the project to keep it in working order. So yes, we replace anything that we come across.
On one of your slides, you showed a purple map. At least it looked purple on our screens. I think it's the one you still have up. What are those little white spots in the middle of the purple?
those are non-participating parcels, the purple is the project boundary.
So are they areas surrounded by the project?
White area surrounding the project is non-participating.
The white area is surrounded by purple. Are those non-participating areas surrounded by participating areas?
It appears, yeah, that's correct.
Will those internal non-participating areas be surrounded by fences with barbed wire over them?
I don't know if they're covered.
You mentioned the SWPPP, which I believe was Stormwater Pollution Protection Plan. Does that plan account for any increased speed in the water that might be generated based on the different foliage and the panels that are on the land?
The SWIP is in place for the construction phase of the project. So we don't anticipate there being a larger volume of velocity of water.
So
once the SWIP is pulled out after construction, then there will be vegetation to slow down the velocity of the water. And typically, before construction, we plant a cover crop of to rise that'll keep from contributing to erosion or runoff.
So sorry, I was momentarily distracted. If I heard you right, then the SWIP ends at the end of the construction phase?
SWIP ends once we get 70% vegetation regrowth after construction. So sometimes it goes into the operations phase, but usually it's shortly after we're done constructing.
Do you have a typical timeline for that?
After construction for the SWIP to be closed out,
Yes.
is roughly it can vary depending on the season. We're targeting the fall to be complete, so it would probably be the following summer to get for the revegetation.
And one final question. Did the SWIP involve any sort of consultation with Lee County and their Soil and Water Conservation District?
Yes.
And what sort of interactions were there with the Lee County Soil and Water Conservation District?
I don't know that we have applied for the SWIP. I don't believe we've applied for the SWIP yet.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Good question, no. Great. Let the record reflect that not only is Ms. Duffy an excellent zoning officer, we had a couple microphones go bad in the last 5 minutes, and she ran around and fixed those. For further purpose of the record, I want to note that Mr. Schneider's PowerPoint presentation, a hard copy of his PowerPoint presentation, was passed out was made available to all in person in the hearing room. And of course, the folks on Zoom could see it on their screen by screen sharing. So we're now turn to questions from other interested parties, one at a time. I'm raising hand, and I'll try and recognize in order. But yes, sir. Find your microphone first. And help us out when you get the microphone. State your name and your community, please. And Mr. Schneider, if you can't hear him, please let me know.
Nick Dixon. You're showing in the paperwork of 160 employees. Would that be at one given time? Can we expect 160 people showing up for work and then leaving from there?
Yeah, we typically would congregate at the laydown yard. 160 would be about the peak for construction. So it could be up to that amount. So they would, like I said, they would congregate at the laydown yard, do the safety talk, do some light stretching, and then disperse from there to their areas where they're working that day.
And what starting time and quitting time would you be doing in the neighborhood there?
Yeah, right around that 7 a.m. to like 4 or 5 p.m. is pretty typical. A lot of times like 5 and occasional Saturday morning or like Saturday work.
So it'll be 6 days a week?
That would be the bulk of max, yeah. Be like a shorter, like an 8-hour day on Saturday. I've seen a lot of.
And are you going to make accommodations for if you have 160 people showing up, assuming they drive by themselves, where are you going to put 160 cars?
Well, a lot of people do carpool. There's a large parking area in the laydown yard, and yeah, it gets a little bit busy, but we make accommodations.
Okay. All right. Seems to me there'll be a lot of impact.
No, that's not a question.
My opinion. Sorry.
You'll have a chance to express your opinion, but you're not under oath right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. Other hands raised in the room, in the in-person room, my back left. Mr. Richard and then the gentleman behind him.
Running out of battery, sorry.
Oh my God. Mr. Richard, if you wouldn't mind standing up, taking off your mask, and real loud voice. I think you got to help you.
My question is, Mr. Had a thought about traffic. Delivery traffic and the car traffic of the workers is going to be coming right to Alvina south, and then they're going to use alternate routes when the roads are posted, I assume. That's why they're using South Alvina Road and the Chisholm Road. You feel that these roads, as narrow as they are and soft as they will be able to accommodate this kind of traffic.
First of all, could you hear the question, Mr. Schneider?
I think I got most of it. Yes, I mean, I know the road down there are narrow. Our Green River project is widen some areas and do some improvements prior to construction. So it'll be part of our engineering analysis on the road conditions and part of our talk to the road use agreement with the Colony Township Road Commissioner.
Well, the question was, I'll phrase it as best I can, as Mr. Richard asked it. Do you feel that roads can handle the truck traffic?
I've seen Green River get
That's the answer to the question. Any other questions, Mr. Richard?
I have a question about dust control. We do have a problem with that right now with
You're telling them things. You got it. You started to just ask them a question, please. Just ask him a question. You told him about.
Know what it's going to do about dust control.
There you go.
We run water trucks throughout the site all day, every day as needed. That's very typical practice.
Is that during construction only?
That's during construction, and then once it's revegetated, we don't anticipate dust being an issue.
Apparently that's it. The gentleman behind him, Mr. Jeffy?
Hi, Brian Field from Aldana. What are the noise levels? I assume you're gonna be counting these posts in for, the solar panels, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
What are the noise levels? I assume you're gonna be putting quite a few posts in the ground. What are the noise levels off of whatever you're using to put them in?
Yeah, we use smaller, pile driving pneumatic equipment. I don't know the exact decibel level. When you're right up next to them, we require hearing protection. But as we get away a little further, it's less noticeable, but, it does create some noise similar to a construction site. So there's also heavy civil, equipment running around that makes just as loud, if not, maybe, probably roughly the same amount of decibel level as the pile driving equipment.
Will all the equipment be contained on site, or will it be running down the road, amongst other traffic, children playing, etc.?
I would expect the traffic of the heavy equipment to stay within the footprint of the project. Yeah.
Is there anything to reduce speed for the construction traffic, as there is children, elderly people that do walk on these roads? And if you got a semi driving down the road, say
Just ask him a question.
60 miles an hour, is there any revisions to reduce the speed limit in your construction zones around the roads?
Yeah, so similar to what we did with the Green River Bridge project, we posted lower speed limits just for our construction traffic, just for the safety of the community as well as our craft employees.
And for all the contractors that are gonna be parking, that will all be done on site, right? There's not gonna be anybody that is gonna be parking, say, in the ditch, running up the ditches, anything like that?
Correct, it'll be on either in our laydown yard or parking within the project footprint.
How would you know if you hit a tile that was unmarked? You said you're gonna replace all the tiles that get hit. How would you know there's a lot of unmarked tiles that date way, way back. How would you know you hit them?
Yeah, I mean, if you pull it up, the material gets drug up, or, they'll create a suction there where water and soil are getting pulled in or whatnot. So, I mean, a lot of things that can kind of indicate whether it's being hit. If it's an open trench, obviously you can see the tile down there busted down. So there's a few different ways to kind of identify those problem areas.
Thank you. By raising the hand, any other folks with a question or more? All right, seeing none, I will turn to the Zoom people. Joyce, I can't put no hands, no any chats. Are they all on? You're muted. Can you unmute them to see if anybody wants to talk? Okay, folks on Zoom, Ms. Hinkle just tried to unmute you. And I don't see anyone who accepted that. If that's the right word. I'll give you just another 15 seconds, people on Zoom, to either raise a hand or find the chat button to indicate you have a question. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schneider. I can't tell you to step down because you're probably sitting in a chair somewhere in your office or your house. So you are finished, and thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Kennedy, any further evidence tonight?
If I have another witness I could call, however, I think it'd be over the time allotment for tonight.
A lot over, just a Well, there's time for crossing. All right. It's that tough time, that sort of Netherland folks where I'm gonna make a call whether you keep going ahead. But I don't want everybody here to be here at 10 o'clock after we're done with everything. Because I don't want to have Ms. Kenny present a witness and then not everybody a chance tonight to ask that witness question. So, okay. I will recess this session until tomorrow night, 7 o'clock here at the Lee County, the old Lee County Courthouse. Thanks, folks. Be safe. Anybody wants to volunteer raking yards or chainsawing up limbs in my house, let me know.
All right.
Andrew's all on, he's gonna do his presentation. Charlie, did you kill the,
You better go to True Value Hardware.
What's that?
is the YouTube still running?
Yeah, I'll turn it off.
Better buy them by the case.